Out of the Dust by Karen Hesse. Winter, 1934. Beginning, August 1920. As summer wheat came ripe, so did I, born at home on the kitchen floor. Ma crouched barefoot, bare-bottomed over the swept boards, because that's where Daddy said it'd be best. I came too fast for the doctor, bawling as soon as Daddy wiped his hand around inside my mouth. To hear Ma tell it, I hollered myself red the day I was born. Red's the color I've stayed ever since. Daddy named me Billy Joe. He wanted a boy. Instead, he got a long-legged girl with a wide mouth and cheekbones like bicycle handles. He got a red-headed, freckle-faced, narrow-hipped girl with a fondness for apples and a hunger for playing fierce piano. From the earliest I can remember, I've been restless in this little panhandle shack we call home, always getting in Ma's way with my pointy elbows, my fidgety legs. By the summer I turned 9, Daddy had given up about having a boy. He tried making me do. I look just like him. I can handle myself most everywhere he puts me, even on the tractor, though I don't like that much. Ma tried having other babies. It never seemed to go right except with me. But this morning, Ma let on as how she's expecting again. Other than the 3 of us, there's not much family to speak of. Daddy, the only boy Kelby left, since Grandpa died from a cancer that ate up the most of his skin. And Aunt Ellis, almost 14 years older than Daddy and living in Lubbock, away south of here and a whole world apart, to hear Daddy tell it. And Ma, with only great Uncle Floyd, old as ancient Indian bones and mean as a rattler, rotting away in that room down in Dallas. I'll be nearly 14, just like Aunt Ellis was when Daddy was born by the time this baby comes. Wonder if Daddy'll get his boy this time. January 1934. Rabbit battles. Mr. Noble and Mr. Romney have a bet going as to who can kill the most rabbits. It all started at the rabbit drive last Monday over to Sturgis when Mr. Noble got himself worked up about the damage done to his crop by jacks. Mr. Romney swore he'd had more rabbit trouble than anyone in Cimarron County. They pledged revenge on the rabbit population, wagering who could kill more. They ought to just shut up, betting on how many rabbits they can kill. Honestly, grown men clubbing bunnies to death makes me sick to my stomach. I know rabbits eat what they shouldn't, especially this time of year when they could hop halfway to Liberal and still not find food. But Miss Freeland says if we keep plowing under the stuff they ought to be eating, what are they supposed to do? Mr. Noble and Mr. Romney came home from Sturgis Monday with 20 rabbits apiece, a tie. It should have stopped there, but Mr. Romney wasn't satisfied. He said Noble cheated. He brought in rabbits somebody else killed, and so the contest goes on. Those men, they used to be best friends. Now they can't be civil with each other. They scowl as they pass on the street. I'm scowling, too. But scowling won't bring the rabbits back. They're all skinned and cooked and eaten by now. At least they didn't end up in Romney and Noble's cookpots. They went to families that needed the meat. January 1934. Losing Livy. Livy Killian moved away. I didn't want her to go. We've been friends since first grade. The farewell party was Thursday night at the Old Rock Schoolhouse. Livy had something to tease each of us about, like Ray sleeping through reading class and Hillary, who on her speed writing test put an even ton of children instead of an even 10. Livy said goodbye to each of us, separately. She gave me a picture she'd made of me sitting in front of a piano, wearing my straw hat, an apple halfway to my mouth. I handed Livy the memory book we'd all filled with our different slants. I couldn't get the muscles in my throat relaxed enough to tell her how much I'd miss her. Livy helped clean up her own party, wiping spilled lemonade, gathering sandwich crusts, sweeping cookie crumbs from the floor, while the rest of us went home to study for semester reviews. Now Livy's gone west, out of the dust, on her way to California, where the wind takes a rest sometimes. And I'm wondering what kind of friend I am, wanting my feet on that road to another place instead of Livy's. January 1934. Me and Mad Dog. Arlie Wanderdale, who teaches music once a week at our school, though Ma says he's no teacher at all, just a local song plugger. Arlie Wanderdale asked if I'd like to play a piano solo at the Palace Theater on Wednesday night. I grinned, pleased to be asked, and said that'd be all right. I didn't know if Ma would let me. She's an old mule on the subject of my schooling. She says, you stay home on weeknights, Billy Joe, and mostly that's what I do. But Arlie Wanderdale said, the management asked me to bring them some talent, Billy Joe, and I thought of you. Even before Mad Dog Craddock, I wondered. You and Mad Dog, Arlie Wanderdale said. Darn that blue-eyed boy with his fine face and his smooth voice, twice as good as a plowboy has any right to be. I suspected Mad Dog had come first to Arlie Wanderdale's mind, but I didn't get too riled. Not so riled I couldn't say yes. January 1934. Permission to play. Sometimes, when Ma's busy in the kitchen, or scrubbing, or doing wash, I can ask her something in such a way I annoy her just enough to get an answer, but not so much I get a no. That's a way I've found of gaining what I want, by catching Ma off guard, especially when I'm after permission to play piano. Right out asking her is no good. She always gets testy about me playing, even though she's the one who truly taught me. Anyway, this time I caught her in the slow stirring of biscuits, her mind on other things, maybe the baby growing inside her, I don't know. But anyhow, she was distracted enough. I was determined enough. This time I got just what I wanted, permission to play at the Palace. January 1934. On stage. When I point my fingers at the keys, the music springs straight out of me. Right hand playing sharp notes as tongues, telling stories while the smooth, buttery rhythms back me up on the left. Folks sway in the palace aisles, grinning and stomping in, out of breath, and the rest, eyes shining, fingers snapping, feet tapping. It's the best I've ever felt. Playing hot piano, sizzling with Mad Dog, swinging with the Black Mesa boys, or on my own, crazy, pestering the keys. That is heaven. How supremely heaven playing piano can be. January 1934. Birthday for FDR. I played so well on Wednesday night. Arlie put his arm across my shoulder and asked me to come and perform at the President's birthday ball. Ma can't say no to this one. It's for President Roosevelt. Not that Mr. Roosevelt will actually be there. But the money collected at the ball, along with balls all over the country, will go, in the President's name, to the Warm Springs Foundation, where Mr. Roosevelt stayed once when he was sick. Someday, I plan to play for President Franklin Delano Roosevelt himself. Maybe I'll go all the way to the White House in Washington, D.C. In the meantime, it's pretty nice, Arlie asking me to play twice for Joyce City. January 1934. Not too much to ask. We haven't had a good crop in 3 years, not since the bounty of '31, and we're all whittled down to the bone these days. Even Ma with her new round belly. But still, when the committee came asking, Ma donated 3 jars of applesauce and some cured pork and a feed sack nightie she'd sewn for a coming baby. February 1934. Mr. Hardley's money handling. It was Daddy's birthday, and Ma decided to bake him a cake. There wasn't money enough for anything like a real present. Ma sent me to fetch the extras, with 50 cents she'd been hiding away. Don't go to Joyce City, Billy, she said. You can get what we need down Hardley's store. I slipped the coins into my sweater pocket, the pocket without the hole, thinking about how many sheets of new music 50 cents would buy. Mr. Hardley glared when the Wonder Bread door banged shut behind me. He squinted as I creaked across the wooden floor. Mr. Hardley was in the habit of charging too much for his stale food, and he made bad change when he thought he could get away with it. I squinted back at him as I gave him Ma's order. Mr. Hardley's been worse than normal since his attic filled with dust and collapsed under the weight. He hired folks for the repairs and argued over every nail and every little minute. The whole place took shoveling for days before he could open again, and some stock was so bad it had to be thrown away. The stove clanked in the corner as Mr. Hardley filled Ma's order. I could smell apples, ground coffee, and peppermint. I sorted through the patterns on the feed bags, sneezed dust, blew my nose. When Mr. Hardley finished sacking my things, I paid the bill, and tucking the list in my pocket along with the change, hurried home so Ma could bake the cake before Daddy came in. But after Ma emptied the sack, setting each packet out on the oilcloth, she counted her change, and I remember with a sinking feeling that I hadn't kept an eye on Mr. Hardley's money handling, and Mr. Hardley had cheated again. Only this time he cheated himself, giving us 4 cents extra. So while Ma mixed the cake, I walked back to Mr. Hardley's store, back through the dust, back through the Wonder Bread door, and thinking about the second-hand music in a moldy box at the shop in Joyce City, music I could have for 2 cents a sheet, I placed Mr. Hardley's overpayment on the counter and turned to head back home. Mr. Hardley cleared his throat, and I wondered for a moment if he'd call me back to offer a piece of peppermint or pick me out an apple from the crate, but he didn't, and that's okay. Ma would have thrown a fit if I'd taken a gift from him. February 1934. 50 miles south of home. An Amarillo wind blew plate glass windows in, tore electric signs down, ripped wheat straight out of the ground. February 1934. Rules of dining. Ma has rules for setting the table. I place plates upside down, glasses bottom side up, napkins folded over, forks, knives, and spoons. When dinner is ready, we sit down together, and Ma says, "Now." We shake out our napkins, spread them on our laps, and flip over our glasses and plates, exposing neat circles, round comments on what life would be without dust. Daddy says, "Potatoes are peppered plenty tonight, Polly, and chocolate milk for dinner, aren't we and Clover?" When really all our pepper and chocolate is nothing but dust. I heard word from Livy Killian. The Killians can't find work, can't get food. Livy's brother Reuben, 15 last summer, took off thinking to make it on his own. I hope he's okay. With the baby growing inside Ma, it scares me thinking, where would we be without somewhere to live, without some work to do, without something to eat? At least we've got milk, even if we have to chew it. February 1934. Breaking drought. After 70 days of wind and sun, of wind and clouds, of wind and sand, after 70 days of wind and dust, a little rain came. February 1934. Dazzled. In the kitchen, she is my Ma. In the barn and the fields, she is my Daddy's wife. But in the parlor, Ma is something different. She isn't much to look at, so long and skinny, her teeth poor, her dark hair always needing a wash, but from the time I was 4, I remember being dazzled by her whenever she played the piano. Daddy bought in an old Kramer, his wedding gift to her. Daddy bought it, an old Kramer, his wedding gift to her. She came to this house and found gaps in the walls, a rusty bed, no running water, and that piano gleaming in the corner. Daddy gets soft eyes, standing behind her while she plays. I want someone to look that way at me. On my 5th birthday, Ma sat me down beside her and started me to reading music, started me to playing. I'm not half so good as Ma. She can pull Daddy into the parlor, even after the last milking when he's so beat. He barely knows his own name, and all he wants is a mattress under his bones. You've got to be something to get his notice that time of day. But Ma can. I'm not half so good with my crazy playing as she is with her fine tunes and her fancy finger work, but I'm good enough for Arlie, I guess. March 1934. Debts. Daddy is thinking of taking a loan from Mr. Roosevelt and his men to get some new wheat planted where the winter crop has spindled out and died. Mr. Roosevelt promises Daddy won't have to pay a dime till the crop comes in. Daddy says I can turn the fields over, start again. It's sure to rain soon. Wheat's sure to grow. Ma says, what if it doesn't? Daddy takes off his hat, roughs up his hair, puts the hat back on. Of course it'll rain, he says. Ma says, "Bae, It hasn't rained enough to grow wheat in 3 years. Daddy looks like a fight brewing. He takes that red face of his out to the barn to keep from feuding with my pregnant Ma. I ask Ma how, after all this time, Daddy still believes in rain. Well, it rains enough, Ma says, now and again, to keep a person hoping. But even if it didn't, your daddy would have to believe. It's coming on spring, and he's a farmer. March 1934. Foul as maggoty stew. Arlie Wanderdale said the rehearsals for Sunny of Sunside shouldn't take me out of school more than twice next week. When I told Ma, she got angry about my missing school to play piano for some show. Me and Daddy were trying our best to please Ma, for fear of what it might do to the baby if we don't. I don't know why she's so against my playing. She says that school is important, but I do all right in school. I know she doesn't like the kind of music I play, but sometimes I think she's just plain jealous when I'm at the piano and she's not. And maybe she's a little afraid of me going somewhere with the music she can't follow, or of the music taking me so far away one day I'll never come home. Whatever the reason, she said I couldn't do it. Arlie had to get somebody to take my place. I do as she says. I go to school. And in the afternoons I come home, run through my chores, do my reading and my math work at the kitchen table, and all the while I glare at Ma's back with a scowl, foul as maggoty stew. March 1934. State tests. When I got home, I told Ma our school scored higher than the whole state on achievement test, and I scored top of 8th grade. Ma nodded. I knew you could. That's all she said. She was proud, I could tell, but she didn't coo like Mad Dog's Ma or go on like Mrs. Killian used to do. Daddy says that's not your Ma's way, but I wish it was. I wish she'd give me a little more to hold on to than I knew you could. Instead, she makes me feel like she's just taking me in like I was so much flannel dry on the line. March 1934. Fields of flashing light. I heard the wind rise and stumbled from my bed, down the stairs, out the front door, into the yard. The night sky kept flashing. Lightning danced down on its spindly legs. I sensed it before I knew it was coming. I heard it, smelled it, tasted it. Dust. While Ma and Daddy slept, the dust came tearing up fields where the winter wheat set for harvest in June stood helpless. I watched the plants surviving after so much drought and so much wind. I watched them fry or flatten or blow away like bits of cast-off rags. It wasn't until the dust turned toward the house like a fired locomotive and I fled barefoot and breathless back inside. It wasn't until the dust hissed against the windows, until it ratcheted the roof, that Daddy woke. He ran into the storm, his overalls half hooked over his union suit. Daddy, I called, you can't stop dust. Ma told me to cover the beds, push the scattered rugs against the doors, dampen the rags around the windows, wiping dust out of everything. She made coffee and biscuits, waiting for Daddy to come in. Sometime after 4, rubbing low on her back, Ma sank down into a chair at the kitchen table and covered her face. Daddy didn't come back for hours, not until the temperature dropped so low it brought snow. Ma and I sighed, grateful, staring out at the dirty flakes, but our relief didn't last. The wind snatched that snow right off the fields, leaving behind a sea of dust, waves and waves and waves of dust rippling across our yard. Daddy came in. He sat across from Mom, blew his nose. Mud streamed out. He coughed and spit out mud. If he had cried, his tears would have been mud, too. But he didn't cry, and neither did Ma. March 1934.